It's now time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. The US Supreme Court last month struck down Roe v. Wade, which for nearly 50 years protected the right to abortion by keeping states from banning the procedure. The 6-3 decision in the Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health immediately made abortion illegal in 8 states, and it's likely to be the case in nearly half of all US states soon. And this has reignited the contentious debate across not only America but also around the world, with clashing views on human life and rights. With the seemingly irreconcilable views, can there be a way forward from this? Well, the world is looking to the US for its example, and we discussed the situation in the United States and what lies ahead for Americans with Henry OLSEN, Washington Post columnist and senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, and Aziza AHMED, professor of law at the University of California, Irvine. Thank you both so much for joining us this morning in Korea, afternoon for you in the US. And well, my first question to you, Mr. OLSEN. First of all, what are trigger laws that exist in the US, and what states are going to retain or expand abortion access?
Trigger laws are laws that had been on the books prior to Roe versus Wade, or which in some cases had been passed subsequent to Roe versus Wade, that would establish some sort of ban or limitations on when women could receive abortions. They're called trigger laws because the existence of Roe established a national right to abortion regardless of the state of residence, but they would be triggered into effect if Roe were ever overturned. That's what happened in the Dobbs case about 2 weeks ago. So many of these states will have those laws come into effect. It'll be interesting to see whether or not state legislatures amend or repeal some of those laws, because some of the jurisdictions are no longer as staunchly anti-abortion as they were when those laws were initially adopted. But for a short period of time, at least, they will be on the books.
And Professor Ahmed, now the court held that abortion is a question of profound moral and social importance, and they left it as a political decision for each state. And do you think this was the right decision from your perspective, of course? I mean, what are the biggest concerns right now?
Well, no, I don't think this is the right decision. I think we need to have a strong right to abortion and a country that protects bodily autonomy. Leaving the decision to the states means that state legislatures will now be acting on abortion. And, you know, another complicating factor here is that many of our state legislators are now being elected through voting rules that are unfair. Many people can't vote anymore in the United States or have difficulty getting to the polls. This means that the state legislators and the opinion of state legislators actually don't represent the views of the people in the state. So we have this problem brewing where even though the majority of Americans do support abortion, at the state level we might see laws that are much more conservative and much more hostile to the right to abortion.
Mr. OLSEN, of course, people on the pro-choice side of the argument see the issue as the ruling as a violation of women's right to choose, and their protests against the court's ruling, it's been making headlines all around the world. But recent polls do show that those who are in favour of the ruling amount to around 40%, which is also quite sizable given the size of the American population. And well, what were the main reasons that pro-life advocates saw a need for Roe versus Wade to be overturned? I mean, why not just leave things as they were?
Well, pro-life advocates are people who believe in the sanctity of the unborn child. They establish that that right to bodily autonomy or bodily integrity extends as much to the unborn human child within a woman as it extends to the adult woman or a teenage woman who is carrying that child. Roe versus Wade precluded them from having any serious ability to impact the national debate or debate on the state. That's why it's been a contentious issue for so long. Repealing Roe allows them to have that voice. It will be returned to states. In some places, they will be a majority. In some places, they'll be a minority. And we will see how the debate unfolds over the ensuing months and probably years as people grapple with the questions of which right or which ability to assume or assert bodily integrity and dignity predominates, and at what time during pregnancy.
And Mr. OLSEN, why did the court choose to make it a political decision for each state?
the political decision was what it was before Roe versus Wade, that before Roe versus Wade, abortion was regulated in each of our 50 states, and it was done by law. So the court did not per se make it a political decision. What it did was remove the barrier to it having been a political decision, which was what the course and the practice in the United States had been for over 150 years prior to the ruling in Roe.
Professor Ahmed, now what does this situation mean for American women looking to get abortions in states where they are now banned or on the verge of being banned?
Well, it's really a terrible situation. We already are seeing signs. There's an article published in a journal that I saw this morning that said that already in Texas, we're seeing higher rates of maternal morbidity, basically harms, physical harms being caused during pregnancy due to physicians waiting to intervene and help women. We're going to see children get pregnant. We've already seen multiple cases of 10-year-olds. I know that Mr. Olsen referred to teenagers and women, but we're talking about children here who have had to cross state lines in order to get abortions because they can no longer access abortion in their own states. And we will see women die because physicians are confused at the moment about when they are allowed to intervene, even in states which have an exception, let's say for life, to save the life of a woman. Physicians don't know how long they should wait, how close a woman has to be to death before they actually intervene. These are the types of cases that we saw in Ireland and around the world, which actually prompted national governments to take action finally and mobilize people. For example, in Ireland, the case of Savita Halappanavar is the case that basically mobilized everyone when they wouldn't give her an abortion, despite the fact that she was dying and the fetus inside her would never had a chance of survival.
Mr. Olsen, what would you make of these kind of concerns that allowing states to ban abortion might endanger women's health and their livelihoods?
Well, obviously when states regulate abortion, they're going to have to take that extremely seriously. But what pro-life advocates would say is that millions of unborn children have had their lives ended, terminated through abortion since the 1973 decision, and that their lives matter too. I think what we'll see is a earnest and serious debate by people representing various extremes, and most Americans have nuanced views in the middle, proposing a right to abortion at some point in the pregnancy, but not a right afterwards, which is what the case is in most of the developed world. So we're going to have a very serious debate, and I think that the life, health, and safety of the adult, teenage, or in the rare case, preteen woman who is carrying an unborn child will be very much in the forefront as states, regardless of political orientation, debate this issue.
Professor Ahmed, there are currently no laws that attempt to prosecute women who cross state lines to seek an abortion, and there are concerns, though, that this might change among other possible consequences. What are the biggest concerns right now?
Well, like was just said, I do hope that we can, talk across the aisle, you could say, or talk across different political positions in a reasonable way. But the reality is that at the moment, conservative lawmakers are really doing their best to prevent women from accessing abortion services. Some of the trigger bans that have gone into effect, some of the debates that are occurring right now in the United States could not be described as less than cruel. The idea, for example, that an ectopic pregnancy could be delivered, which was circulating this morning, that we should save ectopic pregnancies when that could literally cause the death of a woman. I think we're in it for the long haul here. I think that we don't even understand the types of legal impact we're going to see from this decision. Fertility treatments could be impacted, child support payments could be impacted. And, we're going to see many conservative states try to essentially prevent a woman from seeking an abortion, not only by prosecuting physicians and providers, but also by prosecuting the women themselves.
Well, Mr. Olsen, looking at polls from recent years, it seems that opinions on abortion they aren't as straightforward as one might think, as simply being for or against it. The court's decision, it also presents very thorny and unanswered legal questions. And Many others in states where abortion is illegal, where many people were very confused about what the abortion ban will actually mean when, for instance, it's medically necessary. So what kind of issues are going to have to be straightened out?
Well, first of all, most polls show that the center of American public opinion is to allow abortion within the first trimester and to have exceptions beyond that for cases like rape, incest, and the life of the mother being at stake. Pro-life forces do not want to generally include things like ectopic pregnancies. There's a number of people who have talked about that, and pro-life sources can put that myth to rest. But it's going to be a serious conversation with respect to the two individuals, the tiny human individual within a woman and the adult woman who has that tiny individual. There will be a lot of painful discussions, but it's something that Roe versus Wade prevented us from having, unlike in most of the world where this was settled by legislation. And it's one that we're going to be having, not one that will be comfortable for everyone on all sides, but it's one that the American people definitely deserve, and it's one that we will be having.
Well, Mr. Olsen, undeniably, it's a very tough kind of discussion that's going to have to take place. On one side, of course, it sees itself as pro-choice, the other pro-life, and both argue that they are on the side of human rights. Do you think they can ever agree to disagree, or how is the debate going to have to go? I mean, how should America really move forward from this point?
No, I think that the first thing that needs to happen is a recognition on both sides that we're talking about two human beings, is that if we're not able to have that as a common ground, then there's not able to be a discussion about the various rights or the various dignity claims that each of those human beings has. When we look at polls, most Americans have that sense. Some people may not, but most Americans do, and I think we'll find this discussion more possible than many people who are invested in one side or the other currently think.
And your thoughts on this, Professor Ahmed? Do you think there could ever be a consensus, or do you see this issue becoming more and more politicized?
I think, unfortunately, it's going to become more politicized, and I think more people are going to realize the terrible ramifications of Roe versus Wade being overturned and recognize that we need to invest in and work with the needs and desires of the woman who is alive and pregnant. I think that there will be many opportunities to agree to disagree, but I think as we start seeing increasingly seeing, I should say, the horrible impact this is going to have on women's lives as they try to access necessary health services, the more people are going to realize that people that they love, people that they care for, their daughters, their sisters, their mothers in some cases, are risking death during their pregnancy. And that's going to change people. The majority of Americans already, as Mr. Olsen said, support abortion, at least in the first trimester. Roe versus Wade has made it possible for states to outlaw even that. The overturning of Roe versus Wade has made it possible for states to outlaw even that. And we are on a bad path at the moment, and it needs to be fixed. And I hope we will do so through the political process and through voting.
Any final comments on that, Mr. Olsen, before we wrap up this interview?
I think this is going to be a long discussion. There will be victories on both sides, defeats on both sides. It's going to continue to be in the courts, because even under the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe, there will have to be some sort of review as to whether a state regulation has a rational basis in law, which is usually a deferential standard, but not one that is automatically met. Whether there's a consensus possible will be determined through the political process, first in the states and perhaps ultimately nationally.
Well, it's going to be a very long and tough debate, but we'll have to wrap up our interview here. That was Henry OLSEN, Washington Post columnist and senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, and Aziza Ahmed, professor of law at the University of California, Irvine. Thank you both so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.